Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. It is time for part 4 of Rainbow Factory by Aurora Dawn. The room tilted as Scootaloo tried to comprehend what she was told. Her mind broke as she was totally unable to focus on anything. She stumbled slightly until Orion held open a wing and she clung to it for stability. Rainbow Dash noticed this and pointed and yelled with pure fury.
You can't have happiness! You ruined me, and now I'll ruin you! Workers! The brown one! There! Him first! No!
Scootaloo, Aurora, and Orion all jumped. Suited ponies cornered Orion, pushing the other two to the side. He tried to leap out of the way to run, but one of the stallions spun around and kicked at him. The hoof connected to his shoulder and Orion collapsed with a shout. "Get back!" More suits yelled at Aurora and Scootaloo as they dragged the whimpering Orion to the front of the room. The giant machine at the back started humming to life, and the assembly of chains lifted off the top and moved toward the floor. Everyone noticed they were shackles now, and the suits clasped Orion into them. Braving a look up, he turned to Scootaloo.
Don't worry, Scoots. I love you. Goodbye. Goodbye, Orion.
Scootaloo gasped.
I love you too.
With that, the chains pulled tight and lifted the brown Pegasus all the way up the gears. The chains grew taut and stretched each of Orion's limbs straight up and down.
We find the machine works better if the ribs are broken,
Rainbow Dash explained apathetically as the chains spun around in opposite directions, twisting Orion. His screams almost covered the echoing pops and shattering noises. One or two jagged bones tore through his side, and his yells faded to a slow, quiet rattle of breath. The chains untwisted, and then the shackles opened, dropping the shattered pony into a single opening. With horror, Scootaloo watched, her brain overcome with what was happening, detached from all emotion. She noticed that the top of the machine wasn't rusty. It was blood. Blood, just like what was being tossed up from the mangled remains of Orion, as the rest of his body was swallowed into the great machine, finishing with one lone hoof directed straight up, and then nothing was left. As the hoses over the green and red vats of spectrum started spewing forth their brilliant colors, Scootaloo's vision started to fade, and the last thing she noticed was Aurora's concerned, broken voice saying her name as Scootaloo flopped to the side.
In the Rainbow Factory, where your fears and horrors come true. In the Rainbow Factory, where not a single soul gets through. Scootaloo! Get up! Get up now! Hurry, Scootaloo! Wake up! Wake up!
Scootaloo shook her head, briefly wondering where she was and what was happening. In a flash, it all came back and she jumped to her feet. Aurora was shaking her, fright encasing her face. The suits were starting to approach the two now, tasers and shackles up and ready.
Scootaloo! They're coming for us! What do we do?
Scootaloo looked for an opening. All the doors were blocked except for one, on the scaffolding. The suited ponies were slowly approaching, not rushing in order to prevent the fillies from freaking out. Fear was their tool. Scootaloo spun around looking for an exit. There was only one, she realized.
I have a plan,
she whispered to Aurora.
What's that? Clear, fly, fall, complete.
Aurora nodded in understanding, her eyes widening. She repeated louder now so the other frightened fillies could hear.
Clear, fly, fall, complete. Got it. 1.
Scootaloo started counting.
2.
Aurora squeaked as she backed into Scootaloo. The suits were mere feet away now.
3.
A collective shout reverberated around the room as every filly that could actually fly took off. The suited ponies gasped and fell back, unsure of where to go. There was too much confusion. A few of the faster-thinking ones took off as well, tasers at the ready, aiming at the closest Pegasus they could take.
Step 1,
Scootaloo screamed.
Clear!
With her command, the failures started targeting the dark ponies in droves. Hoofs connected with heads, and while some of the students fell lifeless to the floor, the majority of the casualties were the suited ponies. Scootaloo and Aurora landed on the scaffolding right by the door and reached to open it. It was locked.
Oh God, what do we do now?
Aurora cried.
We're still on clear,
she shouted, turning around and bucking at the door. Aurora followed her, focusing the brunt of her blows on the part of the wall where the latch would be. Rainbow Dash, on the other side of the scaffolding, recovered from her initial shock of the rebellion and noticed Scootaloo pounding on the door.
Kill her!
She screamed at the other important-looking ponies.
Kill her!
She started galloping towards the fillies, forgetting her wings momentarily. Scootaloo closed her eyes, pounding harder and harder on the door. It started to creak and splinter. Any second now, she thought, Rainbow Dash will get here. It's over. I'm doomed. She would have cried, but there were no more tears left. But nothing came. The door started to split from its frame now, leaning inward. It wouldn't be long until it was open. She opened her clenched eyes, peeking up at the scaffolding. All the remaining ponies were there, pressing together, holding the enraged blue Pegasus and her cronies back. They wouldn't last long, however. Even as Scootaloo watched, twitching and yelping ponies were falling to the floor below, some even landing in the great maw of the Spectra machine. The pink pony from Levitating Acres was there, and she turned to Scootaloo and Aurora just as the door blew back into the hall behind.
Fly!
The pink pony demanded with pain in her voice. She opened her mouth to speak again, but was cut short as the pile of Pegasus blew apart, with Rainbow Dash standing enraged in the opening. She was on her two back hooves, her front two rolling in the air. A small gash down her side leaked red, and her multicolored mane was torn in a patch. An unearthly howl passed her lips, and her rose eyes were drained of any sanity that was left.
Come on, Aurora,
Scootaloo pleaded as she spun around.
We've got to fly if we're gonna live.
I can't. This is too much. I haven't healed.
Aurora looked at Scootaloo with wide, open eyes.
You go, Scootaloo. Tell everyone what happens here. Let them know.
She glanced back at the wall of students, almost bare now as Rainbow Dash's bloodlust tore them to pieces. Her blue coat was now glistening crimson, almost dripping as she ignored the need for live ponies. There would be more. Cloudsdale could take a small shortage of rainbows. In another few months, there would be more classes, more failures. But for now, all she knew is that Scootaloo had to die, violently if possible. Decades of working for the Rainbow Factory had fractured her. She was the only one allowed in public, and keeping the horrible secret with her since childhood had only led to psychological problems that no amount of therapy could cure. Scootaloo was her last link on sanity, and her failure had deleted that. There was no logic in her mind anymore. No care, no capacity for passion. Only hate. Pure, concentrated, and evil hatred filled the gap her love for Scootaloo had once occupied. Rainbow Dash was no more. Only this monster remained.
I hardly knew you, Aurora.
Scootaloo cooed softly into the yellow Pegasus behind her.
I'm sorry I never knew you until all this. I'm sorry we had to meet like this. And I'm sorry we have to leave this way.
She sniffed. She had found more tears.
Any meeting of a friend is a welcome meeting,
Aurora reassured Scootaloo.
Now, you heard the other pony. Fly, Scootaloo. Fly! Goodbye. Goodbye, Aurora.
With that, Scootaloo levitated and spun around, looked into the yellow pony's eyes one last time, and launched down the cramped corridor. She had no idea where she was going, but any chance of freedom was one she had to take. Aurora blinked a couple times, standing in front of the door. Rainbow Dash would have at least one obstacle in her way to Scootaloo. The blue pony tossed the last of the other students over the scaffolding and slowly walked towards Aurora.
How cute. You think that you, a useless, broken pile of manure, could possibly stand in my way? You really make me laugh. None of you can compete with the awesome power I have. Love can overcome all evils in this world.
Aurora straightened herself in rebellion as Rainbow Dash stopped in front of her. Aurora stayed in front of Dash, barring her entry down the corridor behind her.
Well then, bitch! Let's see if love will overcome this one!
And with that, Rainbow Dash grabbed one of Aurora's bandaged wings and pulled, tearing it off her completely. Aurora collapsed onto her knees, grinding her teeth in horrible pain. But she didn't scream. She wouldn't give in to Rainbow Dash. Rainbow grabbed her other wing and dragged her, kicking and moaning down the center of the scaffolding. She lifted Aurora up by the wing, laughing quietly to herself as the look of intense agony appeared on Aurora's face. Rainbow Dash took to the air, bringing the squirming yellow and green pony with her over the top of the machine. With a squeak of evil laughter, she jerked at the wing in her hoof. It, too, disconnected from the now convulsing Pegasus, and Aurora fell. She landed head first. The door on the scaffolding closed with a gust of wind, just as the machine began pumping out the brightest greens and yellows it had ever produced. And there was no one around to see it. Scootaloo glanced backwards momentarily, her heart pounding. The noise of the constant thump, thump, thump drowned out any other sound in her head, her ears throbbing along with it. The corridor was just like the one that had led into the theater room, cramped with dozens of obstacles jutting out at random intervals. Straight behind her, maybe 500 meters now, the bloody mare that used to be Rainbow Dash was cruising along herself. Both Pegasi were completely straight, hooves forward, wings beating at an impossible count, one trying to escape, the other to capture. Scootaloo looked forward again, focusing on what lay ahead of her.
That's all that matters,
she thought.
What's ahead of me? There's no changing what's behind me. Ignore it. Focus.
For the second time in as many days, a flood of instinct overtook Scootaloo, and despite the terror she felt in her body, the sorrow that had surrounded her, and the evil behind her, her worries had melted away and the thought of flying encased her very being. Down under wires and pipes she ducked, up and around various workers whose complaints and shouts were ignored, only to be repeated momentarily as the raging pony behind collided with them. Her body doing the flying, Scootaloo's thoughts turned to escape opportunities. She whipped around sharp corners at impossible speeds, zipped up and down countless sets of stairs, trying to shake her murderous tail, but to no avail. She contemplated every nook and cranny she passed, briefly considering hiding. She struck that idea down. As insane as Rainbow Dash may be, she was still too smart to overlook any possible spot Scootaloo may be. But there ahead of her, Scootaloo thought she found a solution. A garbage vent of some kind sticking out from a wall down to the floor below. Momentarily she gave thought to where it may lead. Whether out of the factory or into some incinerator she couldn't tell, but it was probably worth the risk. She snuck one last glance behind her to make sure the unstable mare was far enough away. Rainbow Dash was paying no attention to any hazard as she sought her prey, tearing through electrical wires and ricocheting off heated pipes, going through any obstacle rather than around it to save time, but the collisions had slowed her down enough to give Scootaloo a chance. She slammed to a sudden halt over the open vent, hoping for her life.
Fall,
she muttered, closing her eyes and her wings, resisting the urge to start flapping immediately. She counted silently to herself as shadows rushed past her closed eyes, hoping for the best of where this vent would lead. 1, 2, 3. She opened her eyes and her wings and looked up, hovering. Alright, and this concludes our second to last part of Rainbow Factory. As soon as I'm done with part 5, I also have a very, very special treat from the author that I will also be reading for this. So, hope you all are enjoying so far. This has been Rainbow Factory Part 4, and see you in Part 5.